JHK here for the South China Morning Post, SCMP MMA, and join me again ahead of a huge pay-per-view is Brendan Fitzgerald. You've seen him on TV. Now he's on your TV right now. What's going on, Brendan? Like, how's life treating you right now? I know the 4th of July just passed. How did you spend the weekend?
Low key, at home, hanging out with my family, my wife and son, and we didn't do too much. Holidays are funny, right? Like, I don't know about you, but sometimes holidays, everything is too crowded. Mm-hmm. So it's like sometimes you want to be like, yeah, it's a holiday weekend. Let's go to the pool. Let's go to this restaurant, whatever. And, the other part of my brain is just like, everywhere's going to be super crowded. Can we just kind of relax and hang out this weekend? So this was one of those types of weekends. We didn't have too much to do, but we still enjoyed it. Watched some fireworks here in Vegas, which we could see by our house, and just celebrated by relaxing for the weekend.
Well, that's one of the advantages, I guess, of, having a job like yours is that you work when people are actually on their day off. So yes. when you have your day off, everybody's working. So you could take your kids anywhere and it's not so crowded.
Exactly. And especially when you have young kids before they're in school, it's like the world is your oyster. You can go on a Tuesday morning somewhere where it's like people are in school, people are at work, and my busy times are on, like you said, Saturdays. So, that's what life is usually for us. And, especially with the pandemic, you got to treat it, however you're comfortable with it. So, we had a great weekend.
All right. Well, before we start talking about this big pay-per-view coming up, I wanted to dive into this clip that you put up recently on Instagram. It's a clip from 2019 of you interviewing Kevin Lee. I thought you gave some great advice about interviewing there. To get great answers, you ask clear, open-ended questions, then shut up. I think the key part is shut up. I think a lot of people, they forget about that part, right? When they interview somebody.
Exactly. I mean, it's hard to, like for instance, right now, ready? It's hard for you to sit there while I'm thinking and just, it's very unnatural. A lot of people are not okay with that silence, but in a way, it builds whatever I'm going to say next, especially if it's a real answer from a question where it's just like, talk to me about what you remember about this moment. And then I sit here and I'm thinking about it. And it's very unnatural because when we're in social settings, a lot of times either you're talking or I'm talking or somebody else is talking, we're listening. And a lot of people too, instead of really listening and then reacting off of that, they're getting in their head what they're about to say next instead of truly listening to the answer or whatever somebody else is saying, whether it's an interview on TV or whether it's you're at a party. You're like, I need to come up with something to say next. So while they're talking, I'm going to come up with that. So, with my Instagram, I just had a revelation recently of just like, I have so many opportunities to show behind the scenes stuff, to explain some things that might be interesting to UFC fans, to people that are fans of TV broadcasting, sports journalism, things like that. And I've just I haven't really been sharing any of that stuff, but it feels good to share it. And if a young broadcaster will email me and say, hey, can I have some advice? I will usually say, give me your phone number. I'll call you and we'll talk for a half hour. You know what I mean? Just because it's easier than writing out a long email. I'm not going to answer their questions. I'll call them. And I'll just be like, what questions do you have? What do you want to know? And they'd be like, well, and then we can have a real chat. And I'm just like, well, I can't do that for everybody. And, but I can just put out little tidbits of knowledge and behind the scenes stuff and whatever. So that was kind of my new venture. Like literally this week, I was just like, maybe I'll take this old clip and I'll kind of write a little mini lesson on there and see what people think of it. I would think that was interesting. So I'm glad it's kind of resonated with people.
Yeah, of course, man. I always look for those little tidbits, little advice from people, because you never know. You learn from everybody. You have kids. You learn from your kids every day, probably.
You gotta learn from everything, whether it's a fictional show on TV, whether it's a fictional book that you're reading, whether it's an interview with a UFC fighter, you can take from everything. And so to keep an open mind and kind of look for those moments. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. I love watching the different styles of interviewing and kind of taking little bits from them and try to use it when I'm doing it. It's still a work in progress, but I'm doing my best. It's
about reps.
Yeah,
what
exactly.
I mean? It's about reps. And it's different because sometimes it falls into conversation, and conversation is two people talking, and interview is one person getting something out of another. And so you got to kind of like know the difference and also know what you want to do. Like Joe Rogan's show is a conversation. Like he's giving just as much as he's getting from his guests usually, you know, and it's because people want to hear from him because they're big fans from him. So it's not like if you don't ask a question, you're a complete failure in whatever your production is. It's just it's navigating what you're truly there for, you know.
Now, let's talk about this card coming up, man. UFC
Let's do it.
264, Las Vegas, T-Mobile Arena, 20,000 plus fans in attendance. Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor 3 is going down. Is this the biggest fight of the year, as in, you know, hype, star power, intrigue, and beef?
Yeah, I mean, beef wise, like at the end of the year, I don't know if it'll go down as, you know, the two guys that hated each other the most. But that's a sideshow. They're doing a great job at having the beef. Like, you know that they're going to shake hands at the end of it, right? What's going to happen is what's going to happen. But in terms of the fight and the buildup, absolutely, this will be the biggest fight of the year, unless Conor fights Nate Diaz. Like, you know, unless Conor fights again, this will be the biggest one. You know, and Conor could fight again, especially if he wins. He'll probably fight. You know, he'll fight Charles Oliveira for the title, one would think. So, but you can't, without knowing what's on the horizon, this will be the biggest fight of the year. And unless it's another Conor fight, this will end up being the biggest fight of the year. I can't think of another fight that would be a bigger deal than this. Ngannou and Jones is not on the table right now. So yeah, this is going to be the biggest fight of the year because of how close it is, because it's a trilogy, because it's a full crowd in Las Vegas for the first time since, you know, right before the pandemic of March of 2020. So absolutely. I mean, Conor already fought once this year against Dustin, but it was on Fight Island. There was only a few thousand people there. You know, it was not the, you know, the NFL playoffs were still going on, whatever. It was still a monster event, but this is even bigger because of the stakes, because of how close it is, because of the setting, the circumstances surrounding it, and the beef that they've developed since that second meeting in January certainly doesn't hurt it.
Yeah, that's the intrigue part. You know, the cultivation of, or the rebirth of the beef, right? And it's not the same beef from the first fight. It's different. Right. You know, it kind of stems from the charity aspect, you know, of the last fight. And yeah, I think Dustin is also doing a great job of riding that wave too, right?
For sure. I mean, he's known as you know, a no nonsense guy in the octagon that always gives it his all, but a nice guy who does the right thing, humble beginnings. Look what I can do. I can battle to the top. His is more of an inspirational story instead of an abrasive personality. And both can work. All personalities can work in terms of what the fight game is and how it benefits you and what you stand for. But it's more personal because, you know, it's good for business. And, you know, because Conor lost. I mean, he is bitter, man. Like, he wants that back. Like, he knocked him out in the first round the first time around, and he got exposed. He got leg kicked until he got knocked out. He didn't just lose, he got knocked out. And it became a meme, you know, like that can't make you feel good. For a guy that's as famous as he is, that prides himself to be the best, you know, one of the best ever, and certainly the biggest superstar our sport has ever seen, then you got to deliver, you know. And for all of the pressure that people are putting on him for what he's got to do this week and what he's got to continue to do if he wants to still make ridiculous money and be the biggest star and be taken seriously, not only by the fans, but by his fellow fighters in terms of the opportunities that he deserves, he's putting more pressure on himself than anybody else because of what's at stake. So, I mean, you just put Conor McGregor on the marquee. It's a huge night. When he fought Cowboy and he wiped him out and he was a huge favorite. And, you know, the way that went down, great. That was a huge night for our sport. That was a big night that he returned and got a huge win. But it's nothing compared to what he has the opportunity to do this weekend, not only to win the trilogy, but to get back on the winning track and to have the chance to fight for a belt again. Imagine if he, you know, lost the belt, you know, Habib had the interim belt or the belt or whatever it was, and then Conor returned, fought for it. As many said that he shouldn't. He ends up winning. or he ends up losing, and then to fight through all this stuff to then again lose to Dustin. It's just like maybe we've seen the best of Conor. Maybe it's all in the past, that whole rise to stardom. But with a win this week, he puts himself right back in the running to headline another show, to fight for a belt. And can you imagine if he wins the belt again, the journey that it would be, and it just catapults him to more just huge opportunities and just super high stakes in terms of the UFC, like business is good when Conor's at the top, and he has the chance to be right there this weekend.
There's no doubt about that. Let's rewind, back to January in Abu Dhabi, the second fight, the first round. From your perspective, what did you see? Because there's people on both sides of the fence about who won that first round.
I mean, I'd have to go back and watch it again, to be honest with you. Like, I don't remember off the top of my head, like, the number of strikes and whatever. I do remember Conor had some big moments and some, big connections. Like, it was just like, oh, he got him, Off the top of my head, I would say Conor won the first round, but it was one of those where you're not like, oh, Dustin's out of it. You're just like, if anything, you might say, I think I recall thinking Conor probably won that round, but his leg's probably not feeling great right now. And Poirier is in these types of fights all the time. Poirier goes to the deep waters. Look at his fight against Gaethje. Like, when it comes to Poirier, put Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje, all those, they go deep, and there's big shots, and he survives, and he's right there until the end. And if it goes the 25 minutes, he's the first off the school to be like, good fight, man, good fight. Remember when he fought Hooker, and he was just like, how about that, Dan? It was just like Hooker's collapsed in the corner, after just a brutal, brawl between those two. And Poirier's like, yeah, huh? He's like in his face after 25 minutes. So I recall thinking Conor probably got the first round, but man, if I have a Conor McGregor betting ticket right now, I might not feel good, because you knew his leg was busted up. You knew that Poirier was still as game as it gets and was going to be super fresh. And, the knocks on Conor have been the later the fight goes, the more danger he's in. So sure enough, ended shortly after that.
And another knock on Conor was his training camp. He was isolated in Abu Dhabi, but this time around, it seemed like that wasn't the case. Everybody speculated that, oh, this camp is also going to be in Abu Dhabi. But when you watch the countdown, he's actually in Southern California, isolated, doing a training camp with his team. Do you think that changes the perception of McGregor heading into this fight?
I just think that in terms of motivation, there's never going to be more motivation for him. And, didn't George St. Pierre just say recently, like, I think Conor does really well in rematches. In addition to how good he is, he appears to just be as driven as one can be when it comes to righting a wrong, like he did against Nate Diaz, in terms of like going the full 5 rounds, not gassing out, all that stuff. And the documentary that followed it, in terms of his training just like a madman in terms of getting it. He's got all the resources you could ever want in terms of achieving at the highest level. And, the coaching, the support, the resources of recovery, anything, you name it, he's got it. I don't know. I mean, I think the world is a little more open. So that would lead me to believe that everybody's training can be a little bit better, So I don't know, particularly on the location, like what we're going to see differently. That Poirier is coming ready and motivated and whatever. So we'll just have to see. But obviously, he's super driven, like, if you're up by 3 touchdowns heading into the fourth quarter, like, you might let your foot off the gas pedal, if you're like really need to dig deep, which Conor does, then we'll see what he has.
Yeah, Conor mentally, I feel like you give the football analogy, if you're up 3 touchdowns, Conor's the type of person, if he's up 3, he's going to go for another 3 touchdowns. He's not going to let go, right?
Right. And I think Dustin's that type of guy too. Yeah. I think all this surrounding stuff, listen, it's a coin flip for a reason. Like, they're 2 world-class fighters that are so evenly matched, that just have everything on the line in terms of bragging rights, money, a shot at the title, kind of immortality if you win this trilogy. Dustin Poirier has fought Khabib, Conor, and now Conor again. You know what I mean? Like, he's never been to the heights of this part of his career. And if he wins this weekend, then he launches again into another level. Now people remember in 2021, this is the guy that beat Conor twice in 1 year. You know, all of the casual fans that watch 3 pay-per-views a year, or, you know, only when Conor's fighting. Well, now this guy's on their brain. This guy's now fought twice and won twice over the biggest superstar in the sport. And he's a really good guy that people like to root for, that gives back to charity. Like, all of the things are there for Dustin. So I think when it comes to like, oh, his training camp is here and his recovery is this and his motivation is this, a lot of it this week is just noise. It's like, when the gates close, who's feeling better, who wants it more, who puts their game plan into place more, and who can land the big shot, or you know, do those kind of X factor things. You never know. You never know.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, when you stack their resumes next to each other and you take away the titles, who's more impressive?
Conor's rise is like, you know, you look at what he did when he came into the UFC, and it's like first round knockout, decision win over Max Holloway, and then it's like 9 straight finishes to the title. One of them in 13 seconds on Jose Aldo. You know, goes up to take out Eddie Alvarez in round 2, made it look easy. That rise is insane. Like, name another person who's come into the UFC and done that and backed it all up with traps. I don't think you can ever like equal that. Obviously, in the past 4 fights or whatever it is for McGregor, like the fact that he's only won once since 2016 in a mixed martial arts fight and all this other stuff, like, sure, that knocks him down a peg. But in terms of like his rise and what he did along the way against the names he did it against, Chad Mendes and Dustin Poirier was one of them, and like all of these guys, to win 2 titles, to, you know, make that $100 million payday against Floyd Mayweather happen. Like, nobody's done that. So to me, resume wise, you still have to say, well, Conor's right there is one of the best ever. You know, and now it's like, okay, the sport's catching up to him a little bit in terms of like, these fighters are figuring it out. They're not intimidated by his trash talking. He's not this guy that's unknown, that's just dusting everybody in the first round. It's just like, no, he's beatable. His star power is insane, but he's beatable. And, you know, if you can do that, you can, number one, launch yourself into a new level of stardom, and number 2, make a hell of a lot of money doing it.
Is there one fighter that must win this fight? Of course, every fight you must win, but like for the trajectory of their career, do you think a loss would devastate Poirier more or McGregor?
I mean, it's tough to say. It's like, it's such an important fight, but push comes to shove, it seems to be more important that Conor would win, because if Conor doesn't win, then he's outside the top 5, or, you know, whatever. I don't know where he's ranked at this second, but then like he has to, you would think, main event every fight that he's in of a pay-per-view, right? It has to be this main event of a pay-per-view. He's that big of a star. He commands that much money, value to the company, all that sort of stuff. But if you're like the 7th ranked lightweight, should you be headlining a pay-per-view? Like, no other fighter would do that, right? If you're like number 8, like, you wouldn't headline a pay-per-view. You would headline a fight night, maybe on big ESPN, maybe one of the bigger shows, or you'd be like a huge co-main event or something like that, like Nate Diaz was, because you're that big of a star. But you wouldn't have like this argument from a sporting perspective of you should be in a 5-round title fight or headline a pay-per-view, whatever it is. But McGregor is that, and like, he doesn't belong anywhere else. So if he loses, then it poses an interesting question for how he goes about the future of his career. If Dustin loses, he's still going to be right there. Conor's going to fight for the title. Dustin would still be in the top 5. Dustin would still get a top 5 opponent next. Dustin would still be able to, you would think, fight for a title in short order, unless it were against McGregor, because, you know, 4 fights, we're not about to do, you know, best out of 5 here or whatever. But, you know, in terms of career trajectory and what it would mean going forward, I think Conor probably has more at stake, even though he has generational, ridiculous, life-changing money. So you could say, okay, he could lose 10 more fights. He's fine. His family's fine for generations. But in terms of the trajectory of his career and like the questions that it would pose next, I would say Conor.
Yeah, it'd be weird to see Conor maybe headline a fight night or something. That just...
It's like, you couldn't do that. It would be a bad business decision.
Exactly.
It'd be a bad business decision by ESPN and the UFC. It'd be like, why are we putting, you know, you make it raises the whole profile of everything. It becomes this big fight or whatever. But again, like, Paul Felder was ranked number 6 or 7. It's just like, okay, cool. Is he going to headline a pay-per-view? Because, it's like, no, that's not how it works in almost all cases. But you got to stay at the top if you want to get those big spots, or it's got to be this special thing. And then it kind of weaves this line of sport and entertainment, which is what we are anyways, but it causes a little bit of a interesting kind of puzzle that you have to put together, that you have to figure out.
Yeah, it is a puzzle. Now, the co-main event, I think this is a more unique matchup between Wonderboy Thompson and Dorino, Burns, Gilbert Burns. Striker versus grappler. A lot of people believe that, but really, it's two really, really high-level mixed martial artists heading into that matchup. What do you think about this fight?
These are the fights. We love the sport when there's true bad blood and there's world-class fighters, because if there's like bad blood and it's a basketball series or a game or whatever, that can be really compelling. But in the end, they're playing basketball. But if there's real bad blood, like DC has said this in the past, like at the end of it, they're going to get in a fist fight. Like that's the beauty of the sport. But the other beauty of the sport is when you can take two of the nicest, most respectful, world-class athletes at what they're great at, and then they can also fight. Like they're going to be all the respect in the world between those two guys, and one's a jiu-jitsu expert, world champion, and the other guy is a cry. This is like a throwback to UFC 1. This is like how the sport got started. So for as much as you love the bad blood and the buildup of trash talk and real animosity, and then the fact that they're going to get into a fight, it's also very special when you have so much at stake, probably a title shot, against two of the nicest, most down-to-earth world-class athletes who also are just specialists in such different areas, and then you lock the gates on them. Like that is also the beauty of the sport. And I just love that we're getting all of it. We're getting, sorry, can you hear me? Oh, sorry. You're getting my headphones messed up. You're getting O'Malley on the main card. You're getting these two with a lot at stake, with respectful martial arts code, different disciplines, and then you're getting trilogy, huge superstar, title shot on the line in the main event. Like you're getting it all. In that co-main event, yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the greatest things about the sport is when two very nice guys, very respectful, live by the martial arts code, world champions in their different disciplines, they'll also fight, and we'll see what's what.
Yeah, I love it. I love the different spectrums of what we get in this
we
card.
Get it all.
Yeah,
we get it all. We get all the sport, the theatrics, the animosity, the bad blood, the trilogy settled, the title shots like to be determined, the O'Malley still rising prospect, young guy, like everything. It's amazing.
And there's a lot of talk about Thompson, right? This could be his last chance at clinching a shot at the title. With how the division is stacked up and age probably being a factor for Thompson. Do you feel like the urgency is there for Wonderboy compared to Burns?
Yeah, I mean, I have to remember off the top of my head how old Burns is. What, like 31 or something, or 32?
Yeah, early 30s.
Yeah. So Burns, you'd think, has more miles left on him. What's Wonderboy, 38? I've never met a younger looking 38-year-old. I mean, like Tom Brady's turning 44 this summer, and like Wonderboy's on that trajectory. Typically doesn't take a lot of damage. Obviously takes care of himself. Like looks like he's 27. So you can never totally close the door on it, because especially in this sport and with a guy like Wonderboy, like what are their rankings right now? Is it like 4 and 2?
Yeah,
something.
Exactly.
Gilbert's like 2. Yeah. So if you're 4 and you lose to 2, where do you go? Like you don't go to 7. You go to 4, maybe to 5 if 5 wins or whatever. So if he loses, he's still in the top 5, and then he's still probably one fight away from fighting for the title again, especially because there's fresh blood in the division now. Wonderboy hasn't fought Usman, and he hasn't, like those guys, like he hasn't fought Burns, which is why this fight makes a lot of sense. He hasn't fought Covington if Covington ends up holding the title. He's fought Masvidal, obviously, but Masvidal needs to earn it a little bit again. Hasn't fought Leon Edwards, right? Wonderboy hasn't fought Leon Edwards. So all of the guys that are up there that have the potential to hold the belt, like Woodley's done, and you know, there's a clear path for Wonder Boy. If he doesn't win this one, then he's got to win one more. And we'll see what happens. But obviously, I think he gets another title shot with a win here. Just depends on what they want to do. But I think Usman would be up for that, you know, considering the options that are on the table as to what might be next.
You make a great point. I think a lot of people are lost in Wonder Boy's age, and they don't think about that he hasn't taken much damage besides maybe getting knocked out by Pettis and maybe the Woodley fight. He got knocked down a few times in that fight. But other than that, he hasn't really taken much damage. And if someone else holds the belt, or even Usman still holds the belt, he can still fight them. Our fresh matchups, Covington and Leon Edwards, all those guys. So yeah, I guess we gotta like extinguish that narrative, right? That it's like his last chance.
I don't know where it comes from. I think that the thing that was holding Wonder Boy back was, like, had the setback against Pettis, had the setback against Darren Till. A lot of people thought he beat Darren Till. If you watch that fight back, you probably make a pretty good case that he did. And again, like, didn't take damage in that fight and whatever. So he's been right there. He's like so tough to put away and so tough to deal with. He's been fighting down in the rankings. Like, he's, you know, he took on Pettis, he took on Jeff Neal. Like, he's done his part, and now he's back in the top 5, and now he's fighting too. And Usman doesn't have a fight right now, and I don't think Usman wants to fight Colby. So, and also, I saw this recently. Colby hasn't beaten anybody in the top 10 currently. The current top 10, Colby hasn't beaten anybody. So he's losing his leverage in terms of a rematch, unless he were to fight. And then, like, the tweet came out today that Masvidal might fight Nate in a rematch, or Colby, right? Which makes a lot of sense on either of those. So, yeah, I mean, Wonder Boy wins. It totally makes sense. Put the striker against the wrestler, and Usman, who's been, like, dominant, and, like, let's put him back in it, you know?
Yeah, let's see it. And I spoke with Burns leading up to this fight, and his understanding of this fight is that if he wins, he still could be a fight away from the title, and he's okay with that. You know what I mean? He's not gonna demand anything because he just fought for the title. And I thought that was a unique understanding, you know, because most fighters, they don't think that way. They're thinking like, one fight, I win, I'm getting the next shot, right? So
yeah. Well, there's understanding, you know, the martial arts code of being humble, and then there's understanding the business of it. Like, why does he belong right back in a title shot when he got knocked out by the champion this year? You know, like, you got to do more to earn it sometimes. They want fresh matchups, especially when it's so one-sided, and especially when Burns had some good moments in that first round too. But and also when, like, there's other matchups possible, and you weren't the champion that lost in the second round that can win again or get your rematch right away or whatever. You were the challenger, didn't go your way, you got knocked out. So you don't just get to, like, win once and go right back in it, you know. Colby's trying to do that. It's just like, and so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts at 170. You know, Leon's right up there too. Depends on what they want to do. So I don't know.
Yeah,
your guess is as good as mine. Yeah. Man, but I, if I had to guess, I would say, if Wonder Boy wins this week, he's in the next title shot. If he doesn't win, then maybe they go with Leon and make Colby fight Jorge Masvidal.
It's great to see that Wonder Boy didn't have to talk any trash to get a title shot. He just had to win fights, because those guys are going after each other. You know, last couple of weeks have been hectic on Twitter, right?
Yeah. Wonder Boy's not going to do that. You know what I mean? So again, like, all personalities can work in this sport, and they do.
Speaking of personalities, one of the biggest ones coming up in the promotion organization is Sean O'Malley, man. When Luis Smolka pulled out of that fight, or not pulled out, he was pulled from that fight.
Right.
Man, have you ever seen any guy that is unranked, you know, garner so much attention from the ranked fighters to fight him?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, but it's about elevating your profile. You know what I mean? Like, and to O'Malley, like, I'd have to look at the bantamweight rankings, but O'Malley, to me, like, he should fight a ranked guy. You know what I mean? Like, Cheeto's in the top 10, right? Is Cheeto in the top 10, or is he like 10 to 15 right now? Right. And, you know, but he fought Aldo recently and, like, whatever. So, and that's O'Malley's only loss, and he's got a ton of highlights. He's got a highlight reel that's insane. So don't you want to see O'Malley against a ranked guy? You know, like you want to see him against a ranked guy. And if you're a ranked opponent, if you're one of these guys in the rankings, usually it's like you want to fight up. But what does more for your profile? Fighting somebody else in the rankings because they're a ranked fighter, or fighting the hype train, fighting the guy with the hair and the podcast and the million Instagram followers and the sugar show and all this stuff? Like, there is so much behind Sean O'Malley that it's all about elevating your profile. And so if he's not ranked, it's like still a smart business move. If you can be the ranked fighter that can beat him, you get a lot from it. You know, you don't just take his place in terms of you're going to be the new star on the rise, but you're going to gain a bigger following. You're going to get some fans maybe out of it. It makes your fight, especially he's opening the main card of a Conor fight. Like, you know, like who wouldn't want that? If I was number 3, I would almost put my title shot on the line to get that kind of spotlight, you know, depending on who you are. So I wasn't surprised about that at all. I mean, it's like, of course, everyone's shooting their shot.
With O'Malley, it seems like he has built himself up to emulate, you know, a Conor. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of becoming clear now with not just his antics or his way of promotion. The other fighters are doing it for him, with them calling him out.
Yeah, he's a big enough name. He's a big enough name. So when you're a big enough name, and when you have a huge following, and when you're a star in the sport, which he is, then same with Nate Diaz. Everybody wants to fight Nate Diaz because they know immediately it's a huge fight. Like O'Malley's on that precipice of, even though he's not ranked, like it's an anomaly. Like if he wins this weekend, he'll probably be ranked, I would think, again. And then all of a sudden you start putting him in some big matchups. But there are a few fighters in this sport where everybody, you know, all of the other people in their division want to fight them because it crazy elevates their profile if they were to get the win. And a lot of fighters are super confident that they can do that, especially against a guy like O'Malley. It's not like he's dusting all these guys in the top 5. All the ranked fighters think, I'm ranked above him. Why shouldn't I think I can beat him and get some more press, you know, and get some more headlines and all that goes along with it? Not a lot of people jump in to fight Islam Makhachev because he's not as big of a name yet. And he's really, really tough. So if you're number 8, you know, as a lightweight, and you want to fight against the big names are just a couple of rankings away. Gaethje and Chandler and Poirier and Dan Hooker, whatever. Those fights are right above you. Why would you take Makhachev? He's still a relative unknown to a lot of the to a lot of the American sports fans and you know, people that are even fans of the sport. He's not Khabib yet. You know, so why would you want to take on that challenge? It's like, it's super dangerous. So it's the opposite though. When you have a huge following, then everybody wants to fight you. And that's the O'Malley situation.
With O'Malley, I don't mind him fighting other guys that are outside the top 15, or him fighting, you know, a guy in the top 15. I don't mind, you know what I mean? Either way, it's good for him. Because if he fights somebody outside the top 15, he could build his highlight reel even better. And if he fights somebody in the top 15, he builds his profile, even though he probably is more popular than anybody in the top 15. So when they put in Kris Moutinho to come in on short notice, were you kind of somewhat disappointed in that? Like, did you expect someone in the top 15? Like, you know, even a Brian Keller, he's not even in the top 15. I thought that was a good fight.
I thought they'd put him against an established UFC name. Yeah, I mean, because everybody was calling him out, he had his choice. And also, O'Malley's been getting ready for a fight this whole time. So, like, never underestimate, like, okay, I'm feeling good. I've had a full camp. This person's jumping in on 2 weeks. You know, whatever their weight cut situation is going to be, whatever their training situation is going to be, he's going to have the advantage in all that. So, yeah, I mean, I thought that they would put him against somebody like that. What did I hear? That Ricky Simone couldn't make the weight. Like, he wanted to fight Ricky Simone, and Simone was just like, I couldn't make the weight in time, which is also a lesson, like, stay in shape and stay ready type of thing. You know, you never know what opportunity. Imagine that for Ricky Simone. He could have opened up a pay-per-view card against Sean O'Malley, you know? Yeah, surprised at that, but it's like, listen, Sean and Mick and Dana and Hunter, the guys that put together these fights, like, who envies their job? Of course, everybody can make fantasy matchmaker and, oh, wouldn't that be a great fight? Why don't they do that fight? Whatever. To actually do it, to have the paperwork, to get all parties to agree to it, money-wise, medical-wise, all that stuff. There's so much that I don't know, and I know them. You know what I mean? Like there's so much to that business of making fights that I scratch my head and I'm just like, how do they not just throw up their hands and be like, I'm retiring. This is ridiculous. You know what I mean? But there's all sorts of circumstances they got to deal with. I don't know why this happened the way that it did, but I'm sure there's a story to it. And nonetheless, Sean O'Malley's going to be on the biggest show of the year, opening the pay-per-view. And we've had ridiculous success at opening fights on pay-per-view cards recently, being insane. Paul Craig, Jamal Hill, Jimmy Crute, Anthony Smith. What was the one in Houston? Whatever. It's been ridiculous. The opening fights on pay-per-view cards have been like crazy stuff, just like weird injuries, crazy fights, back and whatever, you know, with the new crowds, like everybody's ready to explode because it's pay-per-view card time, main card time. So strategically placed Sean O'Malley. Maybe we'll get a highlight in Las Vegas, full crowd, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and on the flip side, on the other side of the cage, will be Kris Moutinho. He steps in on short notice, UFC debut, pay-per-view opener, one of the rising stars in the division. Man, that's what movies are made of. He's in a movie position right now. Like he's in, like he could be the underdog coming in and just spoiling the party. Absolutely.
And if he does it, and I don't know much about Kris Moutinho, if he does it, all of a sudden, like what does he become? You know, now who knows if he gets the win and then he's like interesting on the microphone. It's like, oh, cool. Now we got this guy in the mix, you know? What's the line right now? I was just looking at him. Yeah, I mean, unlikely. I mean, O'Malley's like a minus 900 favorite. But, you know, I mean, I don't know. Anything can happen. We've seen it.
Exactly. Well, one last thing before I let you go. There's a lot of good matchups, you know, in this card. Sleeper fight of the night. You got like Max Griffin, Carlos Condit. You got Nico Price, Michel Pereira. You got Dricus du Plessis versus Trevin Giles. What do you think is the sleeper fight of the night?
It's not a sleeper fight. Michel Pereira, Nico Price. That's not a sleeper fight. That's your. You can't say it's like guaranteed fight of the night, but like it's on the short list. You know, because usually if Poirier and McGregor have a good fight, that's going to get your fight of the night. But I would say number 2 in that position, and only because of who's in the headliner, Michel Pereira and Nico Price. That's it. That's bananas. I would put that as a main event. Like those guys are nuts. In like a fight night, I mean. And who else? Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall's fighting again. Ryan Hall and Ilya Topuria is a big time prospect. So that's a really good fight. Who did he just beat? Did he beat Damon Jackson? He beat Yusuf Zalal in his UFC debut. So that's a good one. They stock the card, man, especially the main card. It's insane. I mean, you have to do it on a pay-per-view this big. Sometimes the prevailing wisdom was Conor McGregor is going to sell a lot of pay-per-views, so you can put whoever and it doesn't really matter, but they wanted to return to a big arena show in Las Vegas with the goods. And so, you know, they're doing all of the right things without putting like multiple title fights on the card. And, you know, it's going to be amazing.
It is going to be amazing, man. And I always appreciate your time, Brendan. And we'll do this again in the future. Have a good week. Have a good month. Have a good year, man. Thank you so much.
You too, JHK. Always great talking to you, man.
Pick a move.